The conference room was buzzing with conversations when my phone screen lit up. Lucas. Assuming he wanted to talk about my trip or my return, I stepped out into the hallway before answering. But as soon as he opened his mouth, my breath caught. "I'm asking for a divorce," he declared, his voice cold, almost arrogant. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Had I heard that right? "I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Good luck." A dry laugh followed his words, as though he were savoring the moment. The ground seemed to crumble beneath my feet. My mind, initially unable to process the information, wavered between disbelief and rage. I pressed a hand against the wall, seeking physical support against this brutal blow. "Lucas, wait. What? Are you joking?" My voice trembled despite myself. "Not at all. I've made my decision. Oh, and by the way, I'm taking the car too." The call cut off, leaving me frozen, the phone clutched tightly between my clenched fingers. Around me, the world continued as if nothing had happened. Employees chatted, laughed, passed by without even imagining the silent collapse taking place inside me. I took a shaky breath. He had taken everything from me. But I wasn't going to fall apart. For a moment, my heart stopped. Claire. He had dared to say her name so casually, as if I were just an insignificant detail of his past. A cold burn spread through my chest, a mix of betrayal and a simmering anger threatening to explode. I took a trembling breath, trying to stay calm despite the storm raging within me. "How long?" I asked in a surprisingly steady voice. Lucas burst into laughter, a laugh that froze my blood. "Oh, stop. You know very well it had been over between us for a while. I just had the decency to wait before making it official." Decency? That word sounded like an insult coming from his mouth. I gritted my teeth, fighting the sudden urge to scream, to demand an explanation. But what good would it do? He had already drawn a line through our story, through everything we had built. "You could have warned me," I whispered, my throat tight. "And put up with your whining? No thanks. Listen, it's better this way. You're free, I'm free, everyone's happy." The contempt in his voice broke something inside me. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of hearing me cry. I lifted my head, my decision made. If he thought I was going to crumble, he was wrong. Lucas remained silent for a moment, perhaps surprised by my detached tone. I imagined him frowning, trying to understand why I wasn't reacting the way he had expected. Did he want to see me broken, begging for an explanation? He was going to be disappointed. "That all you have to say?" he finally spat out, almost irritated. I let out a dry, joyless laugh. "What do you want me to say, Lucas? Congratulations. Thanks for making that decision for me." He sighed loudly. "Listen, Emily, I don't want us to complicate things. I've made arrangements. I've given you a few days to pick up your stuff before the buyer moves in. It'll be easier if you don't cause any trouble." Cause trouble? A surge of indignation rose in me, but I swallowed it down. He was hoping for a meltdown, an outpouring of emotion that would give him a reason to belittle me even more. Instead, I calmly replied, "Don't worry. I'm not holding on to what's no longer worth anything." I heard him exhale in relief. He thought he had won. But he didn't know that in that controlled silence, I was already sketching the outlines of my rebirth. I'll come by tomorrow to pick up my stuff. Perfect. I hung up without waiting for a response. My heart was racing, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't cry for a man who didn't deserve me. I found myself thinking back to the early months of our relationship, how Lucas always knew what to say to reassure me. He was charming, attentive, at least on the surface. But now all of that seemed calculated, almost mechanical. He had made me believe we were a duo, when in reality, I had always been the only one fighting for our future. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the bitterness dissipate. He no longer deserved a second of my energy. What he didn't know was that I wasn't the naive woman he thought he could discard without consequences. I stood up, took a deep breath, and began mentally making a list of the things I needed to grab from the apartment. There wasn't much left, but I was determined to leave with my head held high, without a single regret. The next morning, I arrived in front of the building filled with so many memories. The key turned one last time in the lock. The apartment was empty, stripped of its soul. Just like our relationship in the end. I took a deep breath and stepped forward with confidence. This wasn't an end. It was a beginning. And this time, I was the one writing the next chapter. A bitter smile briefly touched my lips. For years, I had believed in Lucas's honesty, in his commitment to our shared future. Yet, he had played me with unbearable arrogance, sure that I would never cause him any problems. This time, he had underestimated the wrong person. A new energy surged within me. I had been passive for too long, accepting his hollow apologies, justifying his absences, clinging to an illusion of stability. But now, I held in my hands the weapon that would remind him I wasn't a woman who could be dismissed without consequences. That evening, I left the office earlier than planned and took a taxi to the apartment. As I pushed the door open, I saw that he had already taken some of his things. A shiver of satisfaction ran through me. He still didn't know he was leaving not just a home, but any legal claim to it. I took my phone and typed a brief message. Me, you sold the apartment? That's strange, because it was never yours. A few seconds passed before a response appeared. Lucas, what are you talking about? Me, check the papers. You signed without reading, as always. Silence settled in. I easily imagined his stunned expression, his growing anger as he realized his mistake. Then, finally, a last message. Lucas, you'll pay for this. I let out a light laugh. No, Lucas. It's you who just lost everything. Not yet, I replied, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror before me. My expression was unrecognizable. Harder, colder. But he'll realize it soon enough. Leah sighed. Listen, Emily, we need to act quickly. If a buyer has signed a sales agreement, things can get complicated. I'll check if there have been any official steps taken. In the meantime, don't respond to his messages. Let me handle it. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Lucas had always believed he was invincible, convinced I would remain in the shadows, docile and quiet. This time, he was about to discover a new version of me, a woman ready to fight for what was hers. After hanging up, I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. A quick search of the online records revealed that no official transfer of ownership had yet taken place. A temporary relief, but also an opportunity to seize. The next morning, I was the first at my notary's office. He greeted me quickly, surprised by my sudden appearance. In a clear, confident voice, I explained the situation. Lucas tried to sell a property that doesn't belong to him. I want to ensure no transaction can take place. He nodded. As long as the deed is still in your name, he can't do anything without your consent. But we'll lock this down legally. I left his office feeling lighter, fueled by a new surge of adrenaline. Lucas had tried to betray me in the shadows. I had just cut the ground from under his feet in broad daylight. First, we send a formal notice to the real estate agency and the potential buyer to block any transaction, Leah explained professionally. Then, we officially inform Lucas of his delicate situation. Trust me, he's not going to like what he's going to find out. A thrill of anticipation ran through me. I could already imagine his expression as he read the legal documents, realizing he had fallen into his own trap. He had underestimated me, and he was going to pay for it. I want everything done by the book, I clarified. I don't want to give him any opening to turn this against me. Of course, Leah agreed. Legally, you're in a strong position. But get ready, he's not going to let this go easily. I smiled, a cold gleam in my eyes. Good. I have a few scores to settle. After hanging up, I took a moment to savor how things were unfolding. Far from being the victim he thought he could abandon, I was taking back control. By the next day, the first steps were set in motion. The real estate agency, after receiving Leah's official notification, immediately suspended the sale. The buyer, furious at being deceived, was already considering legal action against Lucas. As for him, it didn't take long before he called me. My phone buzzed at the end of the day, his name flashing on the screen. A satisfied smile stretched across my lips. This time, he was the one panicking. I answered, my voice calm and sharp. So, Lucas, we have a problem? The next morning, I woke up with a new feeling. The feeling of having regained power. No more shock, no more pain. Only determination remained. After a quick coffee, I got to work. My first instinct was to check my bank account. Nothing had changed, as expected. Lucas had no claim over my finances, and that reassured me. Next, I scanned my emails. Leah had already sent the official letter to Lucas and the real estate agency. The buyer, furious, had responded immediately, threatening to file a lawsuit against him for fraudulent transaction. I smiled. Everything was falling into place. Around noon, my phone vibrated. Lucas. I let his call go to voicemail. A minute later, a message appeared. Lucas, what did you do? The agency called me. They say the sale is blocked. I waited an hour before replying, savoring the pause. Then, in a detached tone, I typed, "Me. Simply restored the truth. The apartment was never yours." A few seconds later, he called again. This time, I picked up. "Emily, you're completely crazy," he shouted, furious. "You didn't have to do this to me." I let a silence settle before responding calmly. "Do this to you? Lucas, you're the one who tried to steal from me. You thought I was just going to let you get away with it." He groaned, struggling to find his words. For the first time, I heard him hesitate. "You'll regret this," he finally muttered. I raised an eyebrow. "You're the one who should start regretting, Lucas. Because this time, it's you who's trapped." I took a deep breath as I retrieved my suitcase from the conveyor belt. The noise of the airport, the announcements over the loudspeaker, the conversations around me. Everything felt distant, as if I was floating between my old life and the one I was about to rebuild. On the ride home, I thought about my next step. Lucas surely hadn't expected me to react so quickly. He had always believed I was docile, incapable of defending myself. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. When the taxi stopped in front of my building, I straightened up with confidence. The idea that Lucas had dared to sell my apartment still revolted me, but now, I held all the cards. With Leah by my side, the law on my side, and above all, my own newfound strength, he didn't stand a chance. I walked through the building's door and climbed the stairs with purpose. As soon as I reached my landing, I noticed a suitcase placed in front of my door. Mine. My heart raced. Lucas had dared. With a swift motion, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The living room was exactly as I had left it, except for one detail. A spare set of keys sat prominently on the table. A hastily scribbled note accompanied it. Good luck with the rest. A bitter laugh escaped me. He really thought it was over? That I would just take my apartment and disappear, as if I had never existed in his life? He still didn't know that the war had only just begun. I took out my phone and dialed Leah's number. He's gone, I said as soon as she picked up. Perfect. Now we move on to the next phase, she replied. I smiled as I looked around my apartment, my home, which I was finally going to reclaim entirely.